Howdy partners, we're finally here. Final year in this on the Bottomless Pit for 2024. Am I fashionably late with this video? Yep, we're almost halfway through 2025 at this point. I know, you don't need to remind me, but you know what? I'm okay with that. I always like taking my time with these lists because they're personally really important to me. And I never want to rush myself with these things. But if I'm being honest for a moment, a big part of the reason for this delay is me falling totally in love with this beautiful poet that came into my life not too long ago. I was not planning on any of this, but let me tell you, she is sweeter than cherry pie. God, do I love spending time with her. Anyway, we're here to talk about love, yes, but specifically my love towards film. And as you can see, it is a giant list. Top 50 films for 2024. There's so many great films that came out in this year, and I just had to push this list back as far back as possible into the future to just get as much of a historical recap as possible of that year. And a bunch of these films came out pretty late here in Montreal, so it is another one of the major reasons why I delayed this list as far back into the future as I could. And as always, I won't do these brief top 5s or top 10s because that's just not nearly enough to give an accurate image of just how much talent there is in the world today. As you can see, we're positively exploding at the seams here. 50 films! And with the timing of the release of this video, it will also serve as an Oscar recap. Whenever relevant, I will go over the list of winners and nominees for each of these films. And arguably more importantly, there are many films that are mentioned here in this list that didn't get a single nomination. But even so, they are most certainly worth your time. And frankly, it's one of the main reasons why I started this channel and why it takes so much time meditating over these year-end lists, because I want to make sure that I leave no stone unturned. The Oscars are not the be-all, end-all arbiter of what is good or bad. And I'm not saying I'm that either. But before we officially get to the list, I mean, we're gonna be talking for a long time here, so might as well add on another few minutes. We're already breaking the camel's back here with this ramble on these top 50 films of 2024. But there are two films in particular that came out in 2024 that deserve to be at the bottom of any list. Pun not intended with me calling this channel the Bottomless Pit. The irony has not gone unnoticed on me. But seriously, these two films were flops of epic proportion. And even though I objectively think that these are bad films, I'm low-key impressed with how dedicated they were to their vision. Like, wow, you guys really went there. Oh my god. So first we have Megalopolis, a film made by none other than Francis Ford Coppola, one of the most respected filmmakers from the 1970s. He made The Godfather, The Conversation, Apocalypse Now. But coming back to present day, this man sunk $120 million of his own cash to make this film. And this is a passion project that's been in gestation for 40 years. And the end result is a total box office flop. Last I read, it made $14 million. Yikes. Ugh. And this film feels like this Frankenstein monster of a whole bunch of ideas just crashing into each other without any of the pieces smoothly fitting together. On one hand, it is a rather fascinating look at America as this Roman Empire on the verge of collapse. Admittedly, low-key kind of accurate in April 2025 at the time of this recording. But man, was this a pretentious film. Some say, the director included by the way, which I think is very presumptuous, that 40 years from now we'll be looking at this film like a classic. I guess only time will tell. And then the second film falls in a similar category. Joker Folie à Deux feels like it purposefully took a gigantic swing in the wrong direction to just shatter all expectations and create this excruciating cinematic experience and piss the whole world off. Which in that regard, they just knocked it out the park. I'll never forget the comment that I read, "The real Joker is not Joaquin Phoenix, but me who went to see the film." Oh my god. But yeah, this musical felt like listening to nails on a chalkboard. And as much of a hot mess as this film was, there are moments scattered throughout the film that I thought were genuinely thought-provoking. And many, such as Hideo Kojima, feel that 10 years from now this film will be regarded as an avant-garde masterpiece. Perhaps we'll just have to see how this film ages over time. But until such a time, I just can't help but not think about these films when I think of the year 2024 in cinema from a historical perspective. I mean, it is rather like looking at a car crash. It's a tragedy, but you just can't help but look away. Anyway, moving on to immediately greener pastures. 2024 was a year burgeoning with talent. And with these first 10 choices, I would like to talk about a few films that, even if they're not masterpieces, they left quite an impression on me. And some of these films didn't get too much attention throughout the year, which is why I like making these lists as big as they are. Meaningful inspiration can come from surprising places, and we should always recognize that. We should never forget about the underdogs. So, without further ado, let's get started. Speaking of underdogs, at number 50, Dev Patel's Monkey Man is a prime example of the underdog experience in every sense of the word. This film is as rough around the edges as any film you will see on this list, but by God is this an incredible display of frankly, superhuman determination from Dev Patel's part to see this film come to fruition. It feels like everything that could have gone wrong on the production of this film went wrong, and then some. From financial problems, missing props, the pandemic, and serious injuries too. Dev literally broke his bones in rehearsals before even starting to film some of the most visceral fight sequences I've seen in the last several years. And even with broken bones and infections, the man pushed through and made one of the most badass films of the year. Wow. At number 49, I'm choosing The Outrun. Saoirse Ronan gives a remarkable performance as a young woman struggling with alcohol addiction. It was a rather difficult experience for me personally, but an important one. Confronting the painful reality of your bad habits is one of the hardest things you can do in your life, and it's something that never gets easy. It is a lifelong journey, so buckle up. I also deeply appreciate the gorgeous landscapes of Ireland, with the crashing waves that felt like they were washing away all the filth and pain in my soul. There is something very cathartic and poetic about the way the film wraps up all those themes together in one satisfying conclusion. I'd say 2024 was a remarkable year for horror films. The next several films will cover a few of those, but I promise there will be more further on down the list. We're just getting started here with some tasty appetizers. So at number 48, let's start with Heretic. These two young missionaries find themselves trapped in the labyrinthine home of Mr. Reed, played by a diabolically clever Hugh Grant. I don't think any of us had in our bingo cards seeing him play this kind of character on screen, but it is exciting to see him tackle such a complicated and epic role. I enjoyed this horror flick way more than I expected, and it had a few clever tricks up its sleeves. Next at number 47, we have Speak No Evil. This is the remake of a 2022 Danish film with the same name. I know it's odd to have a remake quite so soon after, but there it is. In any case, this Americanized version is slightly more digestible and not quite as mentally scarring in comparison, but this is still an experience that will get underneath your skin. And it pushes some very thought-provoking questions on how we define our personal boundaries. This is the kind of film that stress tests our courage to have conviction behind what we allow into our lives. And of course, James McAvoy delivers once again yet another madhouse performance. He really does nail those roles, doesn't he? Moving on to number 46 with arguably even more disturbing content. Zoe Kravitz' directorial debut is a searing portrayal of toxic male abuse. Not only is this an ever-relevant post-Me Too era kind of film, but it also hits close to home when you think of Epstein Island. Am I gonna get shadow banned just for having mentioned that? Maybe, I'll take the hit. But this is a remarkable thriller that, unless you're some emotionless psychopath, it will shake you to your very core. Yikes! Red flag alert? You bet. And then, though this might not be in the horror genre per se, arguably is even more horrifying, because we're touching real life now. At number 45, it feels appropriate to talk about some World War II films. And there are a few really interesting ones that came out this year. One Life with Anthony Hopkins chronicles the true story of a London broker that went above and beyond the call to duty to rescue hundreds of children out of Czechoslovakia before the Nazi invasion closed the borders. An incredible act of heroism. And then there's Irena's Vow, the story of a Polish nurse who became a housekeeper for this Nazi major. And she had the brilliant idea of hiding Jews within his home. Bold and daring is an understatement to say the least. But for me, it was Steve McQueen's Blitz that stayed in my mind the most throughout the year. During the Blitzkrieg bombing in London, many children were sent away from the city to seek shelter from the German attacks. It is understandable under the circumstances, but try and explain that to a 9-year-old boy who is determined to return to his family despite the incredible dangers. His journey is filled with turmoil and people with nefarious intents, but it also displays an incredible courage and goodwill of people who just want to help, especially in the darkest of times. It is an incredibly inspiring cinematic experience that also explores the shocking realities of racism, even in such catastrophic historic moments. I mean, this is a Steve McQueen film after all. Moving on to number 44, and speaking of Nazis, unintentionally perfect segue. And no, I don't actually believe that Trump is an SS Nazi officer, even if I do find the chaos and batshit crazy decisions that are happening down south in the US to be rather terrifying. Anyway, The Apprentice is a dramatization of Donald Trump's life, and we get to see an in-depth look into what it took to have him grow into being the hustler he is today. The influence imbued onto him from the cutthroat lawyer Roy Cohn, played by a sensational Jeremy Strong, is a force to be reckoned with. And equal praise must be given to Sebastian Stan, who is playing Trump in this film. At one point in the film, I completely forgot I was looking at Sebastian Stan, and all I felt and heard was Donald Trump himself from the big screen. And yes, both actors got Oscar nominations for their truly transformative performances. Well-deserved praise, even if they didn't take home the award. Alright, moving on to more casual and uplifting territory for a spell. I think we desperately need it. At number 43, I am choosing Richard Linklater's Hitman. This was easily the feel-good hit of the summer for me. It's just a fun, clever, and sexy romantic thriller. And Glenn Powell gets to show quite a lot of acting range in this film. literally incarnating the many different faces of his made-up identities of being a hitman to entrap actual criminals. It's an amusing concept that actually has a powerful message hidden within. For me, I extract this idea of becoming a better version of yourself by quite literally acting the part and believing it so thoroughly that you literally become that part that at one point in time was impossible to imagine. And next at number 42 was one of my biggest surprises of the year. I fully admit that I was hating on this film and thinking to myself, I am not interested in yet another Hollywood rehash of some pop culture references that exist already out there. Do some original content, please. And yet, lo and behold, I actually genuinely loved Wicked. I've never been big on musicals, so I was doubly surprised to see just how much I enjoyed this film. And the visual department is outstanding. Finally, a Hollywood film that feels like it uses its budget to great effect without being preposterously overboard. But above all, I feel like the film has its heart in the right place. There's no question this is one of the crowning achievements in Hollywood in 2024 cinema. And not only was it a box office smash hit, but it did pick up a whopping 10 Oscar nominations. And it did win 2 for Best Costume Design and Best Production Design. Totally deserves it. This film looked beautiful. And yeah, I'm totally gonna be eating shit on this one, seeing just how much I was hating on it watching the trailers before the film's release. But I'm humble and open-minded enough to come up in front of you guys and admit that, you know what, I was wrong on this one. This is actually kind of lit. And finally at number 41, before closing off the first 10 films off this list, there were a couple animated films this year that were quite interesting, but for me, it was a low-budget Latvian film Flow that really took my heart by storm. It's just about the cutest thing ever. This is a journey following an adorable cat in this world ravaged by a flood that seems to be swallowing the entire world, rather distrusting and apropos giving our dystopian climate today. And it is interesting to note that there's no dialogue whatsoever in this film, and it never needed it. The emotions conveyed through the animations of the animals is all the expression we need, witnessing them work together on this one boat, trying to survive their ordeal. It's a film that I feel came out of nowhere and just took the world by storm. And it did pick up an Oscar for Best Animated Film, totally deserving and setting a new standard for these kind of low-budget animated projects. And it did as well have a nomination for Best International Film. Big W for Latvia there. First 10 films out of the way and many, many more to go still. And even though we're relatively early on in this list, some of these films are kind of incredible. Hence why I like to make such a gigantic list for you guys. Me rambling on for an hour or however long the end result of this video will be is well worth the effort to shower praise on all these films and also just highlight these hidden gems that many of you might never have heard of. So to kick off things at number 40, I am choosing a film that had a bit of a mixed reception. But even so, I'm going for Longlegs. Some people loved it, some people hated it. I fall in the category of being rather entranced by the vibe of this film. Few films ever capture that atmosphere of pure evil quite like this film did. This is a supernatural FBI thriller that is eerie as fuck. And Nicolas Cage here gives an absolutely deranged performance. Perhaps I can acquiesce to the fact that his makeup looks questionable and uncanny, but that aside, aesthetically I think the film achieves something rather incredible here. And there are a few truly disturbing and surprising twists and turns in this film. At number 39, we have the Bob Dylan biopic, A Complete Unknown. This is a remarkable look into one of the greatest singer-songwriters of all times in the early 1960s. It covers his emergence onto the folk music scene, which understandably left everyone enraptured by his near prophetic-like poetic skills. That is, until his controversial transition towards his use of electronic instruments with his legendary 1965 album Highway 61 Revisited. Even today, that is just such an incredible record. And Timothée Chalamet gives a truly transformative performance as Bob Dylan himself. So much so that upon first watching the film, I didn't fully appreciate just how far Timothée Chalamet went to becoming the man himself. Be it in the looks, the voice, the singing, and guitar playing. Damn Timothy, he really did his research on this one. The rest of the cast is equally great, frankly. Edward Norton particularly is a big highlight for me. And the film did get a whopping 8 Oscar nominations in many of the major categories. It was up for Best Picture, Director, Actor in a Leading Role, Best Actor and Actress in a Supporting Role, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Sound, and Best Costume. Unfortunately, it didn't win anything, but I don't feel too bad about it because getting 8 Oscar nominations already is legendary status as is, especially in all those categories. Damn. Moving on to more absurd territory, and the word absurd just doesn't even begin to describe the madness of this film. Good God. At number 38, we have one of the craziest films ever with hundreds of beavers. This is a black and white sound film with a shoestring budget where we follow the story of this Applejack salesman who's fallen on hard times in the middle of winter and basically goes from a zero to hero journey. And for a long time, he is absolutely incompetent at capturing any of the animals to eat. And by the way, all the animals are just humans in these mascot costumes. And if you think that's weird, you ain't seen nothing yet. That is just the tip of the iceberg of this hilarious slapstick adventure. And it is genuinely one of the funniest films of the year. I honestly debated pushing this film further on down the list. It really is a tour de force of creativity and comedy gold, but these lists are just impossible to rank, and my brain was just breaking at one point in time. But I will say a colleague did mention to me that it is available on YouTube for free, so you have no excuse, go check it out. You really are in for one of the most unique film experiences of the year, and even though it's at number 38 over here, I could easily see myself pushing it way further down the list, but there you go, there are just so many great films that came out this year. Who cares where it's ranked? This is awesome, and you should know about it. Next, at number 37, we have A Different Man. I know Sebastian Stan got an Oscar nomination for The Apprentice, and he totally deserved it over there. It was a great performance. But for me personally, this is his best performance in 2024. And talk about a win streak. Mr. Stan has been showing quite a lot of acting chops, going far beyond what we usually see him as in this Marvel superhero, or anti-hero, I guess. This film is a fascinating character study of a man's inner turmoil of how people perceive him for his outer shell, rather than his character beneath that surface layer. Edward does suffer from neurofibromatosis, a severely disfiguring facial condition, and the film did get a well-earned Oscar nomination for makeup and hairstyling. It was its one and only nomination, unfortunately, but I'll still take that as a W. Anyway, soon enough he undergoes this experimental medical treatment which miraculously cures him of his condition. Is everything perfect and smooth now in life? Well, not quite. This new identity has ironically become nothing but a mask in some strange twisted way. And things get even more interesting when Oswald enters the picture, a man who actually suffers from neurofibromatosis. In real life, beyond the screen of this film. However, this seems to have no effect whatsoever on his personality or sense of self-worth, and thus the dramatic inner turmoil of our protagonist grows even deeper. This was a truly thought-provoking film. Moving on to number 36, we're going to be talking about a bunch of international films, and let me tell you, 2024 was loaded to the brim in that regard. Good luck ranking them. Truly, the international film scene is blooming beautifully, and I can't wait to see what comes next in the years to come. Anyway, South Korean cinema has been on fire for quite a while lately, and clearly they don't seem to be slowing down. Exhuma is the latest example of that, in this very curious take on the horror genre. Here we take a deep dive into Korean traditions and superstitions surrounding burial rituals, specifically around the job of excavating ominous graves. I never thought I'd get to see a feng shui master played by Chow Min-sik from Old Boy fame analyzing a cursed burial zone. It was a fascinating cultural experience, and it is dark as hell. Absolutely riveting, and I feel like nobody knows this film exists. At number 35, we have The Beast. This is a very unique piece of experimental cinema, and it features a mix of both English and French language, a veritable hybrid beast, so to speak, pun totally intended that time. And here we're presented with this dystopian world where AI reigns supreme. Emotions have quite literally become a threat to society, and thus to purify themselves of that, they use this sophisticated technology to dive into your past lives to explore the depths of your soul. It is a bewildering romantic drama for these star-crossed lovers that keep finding themselves in each of their past lives. I distinctly remember when I saw this at the cinema, this group of two cute old ladies just burst out laughing at the end of the film, stood up and shouted to the few of us there in the cinema, "Okay, what just happened? Could someone just explain to us?" And frankly, we were also pretty much dumbstruck by what we just saw, which I think is a normal reaction with this kind of film. Next, at number 34 is the Chinese police thriller Only the River Flows, which starts off as an investigation into a series of brutal murders, where the higher-ups apply mounting pressure for a quick conclusion to a complicated mystery. The film veers off and transforms into a surprisingly experimental cinematic journey. I love the aesthetic quality of this film. Not only do the monsoon rains have this powerful symbolic presence in the narrative, and they do give off Persona 4 vibes to me personally, especially with the rain and these townside mystery murders, but that was also the day we had torrential rains in Montreal back in August, which FYI was when my basement was flooded, and is the reason why I'm still locked away in this broom closet here. I guess art truly does imitate reality at times. And on a side note, the basement is almost complete. Dylan, if you're watching this, thank you. I don't know where I'd be without you. But I will say this room here has served me well for the last several months. And it does feel appropriate to baptize it once again with one final year-end list over here to send it off and go for some interesting changes coming up in the next several weeks/months. More on that another day. But coming back to the list at hand, at number 33, Close Your Eyes is a remarkable Spanish film. A famous actor disappears during the shooting of a film, and that film unfortunately never saw the light of day. And the status of this actor remains to this day a mystery. For all intents and purposes, he vanished from the face of the earth. This might be a 3-hour-long slow burn, but this is an enchanting meditation on memory itself, quite literally through the eyes of cinema. And as an interesting side note, that night when I was going to see this film at Cinemas Back, I was damn near close to seeing Denis Villeneuve himself in the flesh at the cinema. I still can't believe I missed out on seeing him by like a hair's length. They're throwing an inauguration party at the cinema over there after having done this wonderful renovation to this beautiful local Montreal cinema. If you haven't been there, I highly recommend it. Anyways, as usual, I digress. Moving on to number 32, we find ourselves in Canada with Universal Language. And speaking of Denis Villeneuve a moment ago, this is a film that he was shouting out as one of his personal favorites recently. And there is a lovely interview that he conducts with the writer-director of this film. Go check it out. Anyway, this was Canada's entry into the Oscars for the Best International Film category. It unfortunately didn't get the nomination. It is too bad, but I am pleased to see the reception it accrued over time. In this film, we find ourselves in Winnipeg of all places, in this very brutalist Iranian dream world with a mix of Quebecois as well. It is a peculiar Hawaiian pizza of a film experience, especially with this three-way narrative arc. In one hand, we have these kids on this citywide odyssey to get a frozen piece of banknote trapped in ice, and then we have this eccentric tour guide Mahmoud showing various truly odd landmarks in this city. And finally, we have the director himself, Matthew Rankin, who leaves his job with the Quebec government to reconnect with his family. Universal Language has some very quirky sense of humor, and honestly, it is one of the most original and funny films I saw all year long. And on that, it is also a deeply poetic take on the art of cinema. I love this film, and more people should know about it, especially us Canadians. And finally, to finish off this next batch of 10 films, at number 31, All We Imagine Is Light is this remarkable Indian drama about these two Mumbai nurses who share their lives together but are quite different from each other. Anu is young, living carefree, and in the midst of this budding romance, it really is quite cute. While Prabha is older and has a much more rigid demeanor comparatively. She is incredibly devoted to helping others to the point where she barely even takes into consideration her own emotional well-being. Contrasting her young roommate, she finds herself in this non-existent marriage, in an arranged marriage, mind you, with her husband living in Germany of all places, and she hasn't heard anything from him in a long time now. This film is a very melancholic and poetic exploration of the lives of these two nurses that leaves much to ponder after having seen the film. It did win the Grand Prix at the Cannes Film Festival, and I was surprised to see it get a Best Directing nomination at the Golden Globes. But somehow, even with all that praise, it didn't get a single thing at the Oscars. It's unfortunate, but out of our control, of course. And this is the kind of sensational film that I feel that not many people are talking about, and more people should know. And once again, another film that could potentially rank higher on this list. Alright, we're at the top 30. We're making progress here. The next group of films, at least the first ones, are centered around this political thematic. And by God are these interesting times we live in today. So these films are the perfect companions for this kind of dystopian reality we find ourselves in. I'm not much of a drinker, but I might actually need a sip seeing all the shit that's happening in the world today. So with that being said, cheers to you all. Let's get through this life in one piece, right? Na zdravie and namaste to you all. Alright, starting off on a satirical note, because we do need a bit of comedy with all this shit that is happening in the world. At number 30, I am choosing Rumors. One of the most bizarre films of the year. There's some shit in here that I still can't believe I witnessed. Oh my God. The leaders of the democratic world gathered together for their annual G7 summit meeting to draft a statement regarding some global crisis. And would you believe it, they find themselves in the middle of a zombie apocalypse? Question marks, because this latest crisis is more useful to approach as an allegory than an actual real-life crisis. Absurdities aside, some of the things that happen in this film hit a little too close to home. This is a witty satire that works on several levels, and I thought that this was genuinely outrageously funny. Some of the jokes hit really hard. I think of all the countries, perhaps the Canadian leader is the MVP here, played by a brilliant Roi Dupuis, though France is coming in a close second over here. The trailer of the film makes a comparison that this is a Doctor Strangelove meets Night of the Living Dead, and though it doesn't exactly do justice to what actually happens in the film, it's oddly appropriate. This is super thought-provoking and strange. Moving on to number 29, Conclave. This is the latest film from Edward Berger, his previous film being that haunting World War I adaptation of All Quiet on the Western Front. However, in this film, the Pope has passed away, and now a conclave is organized to elect a new Pope. However, Cardinal Thomas Lawrence found himself investigating many of the major candidates and discovers scandals and secrets during this politically sensitive time. This film features stellar performances from the entire cast. Ray Fiennes in particular, as always, is a king of an actor. And this film has a truly riveting soundtrack, stylish art direction, and cinematography. A real film production behemoth when it comes to the quality of its realization. But arguably one of the most fascinating elements of this film is that we as viewers get an in-depth look into the world of the Vatican, one of the most ancient and secretive cultures cultures in our modern era. This film also has plenty of twists and turns up its sleeve. That ending really caught me off guard, and I'm sure it will rock the boat for many. Conclave did get 8 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, Actor in a Leading Role, Actress in a Supporting Role for Isabella Rossellini, and I love her to death to go into the Oscar ceremony in a blue velvet dress. Rest in peace, David Lynch. It was also nominated for Best Score, Best Editing, Best Production Design, Best Costume Design, and it did win for Best Adapted Screenplay. As you can see, we're at number 29 over here, and we still have many films to go, and we already covered 2 films that had 8 Oscar nominations. Could I argue that other films could have deserved it more? Perhaps, but I'm not going to be complaining too much because I really did love both Conclave and A Complete Unknown, regardless where they are ranked on the list. At number 28, we are diving into the real-life recreation of events that happened in the 1970s. Of course, I'm talking about September 5. The historical dramatization of the massacre at the 1972 Olympics in Munich. We followed the crew at the ABC Sports who took the responsibility of covering that story, even though they totally lacked the experience in that field. But they were on the scene, so they felt duty-bound to tell the story. This is a remarkable film for many reasons. On one hand, the set expertly recreates the 1970s aesthetics, but we also get an in-depth look at the meticulous process of covering a live developing story. It was chaos, with information coming by the second. One of the moments that stood out most to me was a scene when someone over the phone was translating German from the receiver on the other end, pointed at the TV, all the while people's lives were in danger. And this was the first time a terrorist incident was caught on live TV. So before that, we never had an occasion to have these morally questionable decisions stress tested before. Maybe they shouldn't be showing that much info on live TV. Who knows who could be watching? It could be the family of the hostages, or perhaps even the terrorists themselves. This film is roughly 90 minutes long, and it feels like so much was crunched into its runtime. I was practically breathless by the end. The film has a single Oscar nomination for Best Original Screenplay, and it's hard to argue with that one. I was riveted from beginning to end. And seeing that we're well into the year 2025 now, I think it's impossible to not think about this film. In fact, I think it was unforgettable from the very first moment. Civil War is a hopefully fictional dystopian portrayal of a near future America. This film follows these group of war journalists that travel across the United States all the way to Washington DC to interview the president, who is on his 3rd term. It's a bit of a race against time to get to him before rebel factions get to him first. Along their journey, they will encounter numerous harrowing events. It is no picnic. I say harrowing, though there is this sense of blasé mundanity about it. This scene with Jesse Plemons, the real-life husband of our protagonist Kirsten Dunst in this film, is impossible to erase from my mind. What kind of American are you? Jesus Christ. That shark-eyed look is mirrored in the eyes of her grizzled war photography journalists over here. The horrors they have witnessed has scarred them and made them numb to current events, and it is a curious sensation to document all these atrocities with this passionless, no-sides point of view. The film packs a punch and will likely shake you to your core, and frankly, I'm rather shocked that it didn't get at least 1 Oscar nomination in sound design, for example. I remember thinking that the sound design in particular was super impressive. But the film really is a walloping package deal. Moving on with one more political film, and arguably the most dangerous and consequential political film of the year. At number 26, we have The Seed of the Sacred Fig. Without question, one of the most challenging films any of us will watch in 2024. This features a fictional story set around the events that really did happen. This film does incorporate real video footage of the 2022 protests in Iran following the death of Masha Amini while under police custody. But on top of all this political strife, this is at its core a family drama. We follow the story of a mother and her 2 daughters, who are otherwise living a normal life, blissfully ignorant of their father's role as an investigating judge in the revolutionary court in Tehran. But soon enough, that reality becomes impossible to ignore. This is a story of tragedy and genuine terror in the face of this totalitarian control. And indeed, this film was made in secret. Filmmaker Mohammad Rasulov fled Iran after being sentenced to prison for 8 years, and if I understood correctly, this would have been the first time he'd been imprisoned for his filmmaking work. Still, against all odds, he persevered and made this film come to see the light of day. This is a level of courage that few filmmakers have ever had to experience. And even though this is a grueling 3-hour-long film, I went to see this film quite late at night, 10 p.m. almost. I was worried I was going to be too tired and not pay attention, but that was not an issue. My eyes were wide open the whole time. And this film was nominated for the Best International Film category at the Oscars, totally deserving of that honor. Moving away from the political themed films for a minute, but staying the thematic of some international films for a few choices here, this time in Ireland. At number 25, we have Small Things Like These, a short but powerful historical drama about this coal miner who discovers shocking secrets surrounding this local Catholic convent. The film's plot is based on this Magdalene laundries, otherwise known as the Magdalene Asylums, a rather grim chapter in Irish history. Put it briefly, in the early 90s, unmarked graves were discovered at these convent grounds. And the horror of that story is told through the eyes of Cillian Murphy's character. He is hot off the heels off his Oscar win last year for Oppenheimer, and he gives yet another incredible performance. And in fact, it is a near wordless performance this time. And he is the kind of actor that can convey a mountain load of emotion without uttering a single word. If that's not the mark of a great actor, I don't know what is. The look in his eyes are simply bone-chilling. This might be one of the most harrowing Christmas films I've ever seen. On to number 24. Evil Does Not Exist is the latest film from esteemed Japanese filmmaker Ryusuke Hamaguchi. His last film was Drive My Car, which I still have not seen. I know, it kills me. I don't know what I'm waiting for. Anyway, this is as slow burn of a film as they come. The first part of the film features minimal dialogue, and we spend quite a bit of time in nature. Even with its minimalistic nature, this film is rich in depth. It's visually quite beautiful as well. The cinematography expertly captures the beauty of its landscapes, and color-wise, it has a brilliant use of the color blue. And then paired with the soundtrack, oof, gorgeous. The story shows how a corporation is trying to insert itself into nature to set up these glamping sites for tourists. And FYI, glamping stands for glamorous camping. And here they're going full steam ahead without any real thought or care about how this would affect the villagers or the delicate balance in nature that is established over here. And then this town crisis evolves into one of the most bewildering film endings you will see of this year. I was not ready for such a soul-searching, experimental, metaphorical film ending. Whoa. You're going to want to see this with someone so you can bounce off ideas. Now, to finish off the 20s, let's cover a few horror, thriller, or just generally fucked up films. At number 23, I'm choosing Late Night with the Devil. First off, I am simply delighted to see David Dastmalchian get finally a leading role in a film. His low-key small performances and these tiny roles over the last 10 years has not gone unnoticed. But man, was this a freaky live television broadcast from 1977 that may just have unleashed evil itself in front of the world. I thought this was riveting, nerve-wracking, and aesthetically impressive, especially with its tiny shoestring budget. Honestly, this is the perfect Halloween flick for you to watch. At number 22, Strange Darling was a wild thriller. There's so much I love about this film. The performance from the two leads are outstanding. There's incredible chemistry here that is both sexy and dangerous. The art direction is stellar. I love the use of red in this film. But above all, the non-linear narrative structure is novel and fun, and it reveals the progression of the story in some truly surprising ways. Honestly, this is the film that really caught me off guard, and I don't want to say anything more. Go watch it. And to close off the 20s, at number 21, I am choosing Kinds of Kindness. Yorgos Lanthimos is on one hell of a win streak here. The year before, he made the masterful Poor Things. That was in equal measure shocking and mesmerizing. But here with this film, Poor Things in comparison may seem a little tame. Kinds of Kindness is all sorts of fucked up like you've never seen before. That is, unless you've seen some of his early works such as Alps and Dogtooth. Here in this film, we have 3 separate stories, each one more bizarre than the last. You have an A-tier cast that gets shuffled around in each of these stories, but perhaps Jesse Plemons is the acting highlight of this film for me. He did win the award for the Best Actor at the Cannes Film Festival, and I was hoping to see this film get at least 1 Oscar nomination, but alas, it did not. I imagine this film is just too twisted and fucked up for your average viewer, and honestly, I kinda get it. That is perhaps a healthy reaction, all things considered, but for my part, I just couldn't take my eyes off this film. This is fantastic experimental art house filmmaking as far as I'm concerned. At the top 20. With each year, there's a point in my year-end list where ranking films just becomes impossible and it genuinely starts to give me a headache. And yet, I make an effort to fit them all in and to rank them as reasonably as possible. No easy task, so just yet another reminder to just take this list as not as the gospel truth. It is all super subjective, and the only real goal here is to just shout out films that I love and to highlight all the incredible work from all these talented artists. And hopefully as well to have you guys discover a few films that perhaps you didn't hear about or that you were unsure about checking out. I know these are dark times in many ways, but man has the film industry been on fire last year. There are some great films that definitely deserve our attention. At number 20, we're going back to the 1970s once again with Saturday Night. It is the night of October 11, 1975, on the evening of the first live broadcast of the legendary show, well, legendary today. Back then, it had to materialize into existence. Boy, was it a journey to see it come to fruition. It feels like everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong that night in preparation for that first broadcast. We get an in-depth look behind the scenes of what it's like to organize this level of chaos. The film goes at a near non-stop breakneck pace that will leave you breathless. A true sex, drugs, and rock and roll story with live wire performances across the board. It was an electrifying cinematic experience. And handily Jason Reitman's best film in the last 10 plus years since Juno and Up in the Air. Next to number 19 is a film that very few people are talking about, which is a shame because it most certainly deserves your recognition. Riddle of Fire might just be the best new kids classic adventure that's out in the wild for you guys to check out. Think of the cultural impact that the Goonies had, except for a modern niche art house kind of experience. Here we follow the odyssey of these three adventurous troublemakers armed to the teeth with paintball guns and ride around town in dirt bikes on their epic quest to get blueberry pie for their ailing mother. This literally feels like a never-ending chain quest of D&D adventures. And honestly, this is one of the funniest films of the year. These kids are a hoot. You wouldn't believe the shit that comes out of their mouth. And I gotta say, the lo-fi aesthetics were super endearing. There's a smoky, hazy, dreamlike quality about the film's presentation that fits perfectly in this children's woodland-like fairy tale vibe. I honestly love this film, and more people should know about this hidden gem. At number 18, La Chimera, a sensational Italian drama that truly inspired me. This is a story about Arthur, a man who just got out of jail, and before you know it, he's back in cahoots with this colorful gang of grave robbers. You see, Arthur is not just an archaeologist. He also has a unique talent for divining locations of these long-forgotten Etruscan tombs. But that is not the treasure he is looking for. He is searching the underworld, so to speak, for Beniamina, a mysterious woman that he lost. This is a beautiful and deeply poetic film experience. And I think there's a lot more to extract from this film than is initially apparent. I also want to shout out Josh O'Connor, who plays our English archaeologist over here. He speaks surprisingly great Italian, even though his accent shows up every now and then. Indeed, some of the characters in the film make fun of him and call him Inglés. And even though this is a quiet and rather low-key performance, there's great depth to be found here. A fantastic young actor that is definitely one to watch. And I equally want to shout out Isabella Rossellini in this film. I know she got her Oscar nomination for Conclave, but personally this is the film that most resonated with me as far as her performance this year. And no, this film didn't get any recognition at the Oscars, unfortunately, but apparently it did get a nomination for Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. This is a film that's been growing on my mind all year long, and it never really left, and it just seems to keep on growing in appreciation for me. And it kills me that nobody seems to be talking about this film. I honestly hesitate pushing it further up the list, but as you're gonna see, the next 20 or so films are just stacked in competition and quality, even though they're all super different from one another. At number 17, a film that absolutely cannot be omitted on this list, Hard Truths. It's ironic to consider that at one point in time Mike Leigh made a film about a happy-go-lucky woman, because Pansy is the polar opposite of that archetype. Here's a woman that is so angry and depressed that she lashes out at everyone in her life, and I do mean everyone. Friends, family, even strangers on the street. And as hardcore as she may be, it is amazing to consider just how much of a great comedic sense of humor this film has. Hard to believe, I know. Semi-pun, sort of intended. Anyways, it really is beyond preposterous to listen to her go on this non-ending rant of complaining that seems to defy gravity and logic, but quickly we realize just how deeply unwell this woman is and how she has isolated herself from the world. This is a tour de force performance from Marianne Jean-Baptiste, and how she did not get an Oscar nomination for Best Actress in a Leading Role just defies logic for me. This might be the biggest Oscar snub of the year as far as I'm concerned. The Academy dropped the ball big time on this one. Personally, I would swap in a heartbeat with Cynthia Erivo or Carla Sofia Gascon for that nomination. I wouldn't even care if she won or not. Moving on to number 16, I am choosing Nickel Boys. This is a film based on the horrifying true events of the Nickel Academy, this brutal reform school in the Jim Crow South in the 1960s Florida. This is a classic case of a miscarriage in justice. Elwood Curtis is a well-mannered young boy who just happens to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and thus his college dreams are forever shattered. This is a remarkable film for several reasons, not least of all because of the cruelty of racism. But I think most remarkable about this film is that I don't think anyone was expecting such an experimental take on cinema with this kind of film adaptation. The whole film is seen through this first-person perspective. I actually didn't realize it at first, but the moment I did catch on to that, it was a revelatory moment. This was an intensely intimate experience, and this film has a few other clever cinematic surprises that I will not spoil for you. In any case, I am delighted to see that this film got 2 Oscar nominations, no less for Best Picture and Best Adapted Screenplay. High praise that is well deserved. At number 15, I'm choosing the Danish film, The Girl with the Needle, a mentally scarring psychological horror film. There's something about the quality of the nightmare depicted on screen here that makes me think of a Francis Bacon painting come to life. If that sounds harrowing to you, you have no idea until you've actually experienced this film. This is the story of a young woman working in a factory during the First World War. She struggles to survive on her own while her husband is MIA, probably dead, but nobody really knows for certain. And in her solitude, she develops an affair and becomes pregnant, but things don't go exactly as she would have hoped for in that relationship. I don't want to go into too much detail here, but this film is loosely based on a true story of a Danish serial killer by the name of Dagmar Overby. Few films so powerfully portray the struggle of poverty in a post-war era like this film does, and the black and white cinematography is incredible. Wow. This was an entrancing and brutal experience to stomach. Word of warning for women out there, for mothers in particular, or any other sentient human being with a conscience. This is not an easy film to watch. It will probably make you sick to your stomach. And this film was deservedly showered in praise. It was nominated for the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival, and it did get a nomination for Best International Film at the Oscars. Couldn't agree more, this film was unforgettable in the most harrowing of ways. At number 14, the anime film of the year as far as I'm concerned. Mars Express is a mind-bending, French animated dystopian neo-noir cyberpunk fever dream of an experience. It's a short 89-minute film that will leave you reeling backwards with some of the most fascinating and novel sci-fi ideas put to screen in quite a while. The visual creativity here is off the charts, and the world building is thought-provoking. If you're a sucker for the cyberpunk genre, this is a no-brainer. It's a real bummer that nobody's talking about this film because I think this film is sensational. And I do believe it has the potential of being a bit of a cult classic several years down the line. I hate to see these kind of genius projects fly underneath everyone's radar. It damn near flew under mine. So go check it out. You will not regret it. At number 13, one of the most anticipated films of the year for many people. Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, is the origin story of Imperator Furiosa, this time played by Anya Taylor-Joy, who is on an absolute win streak lately. I don't think we could have found a better actress to helm this project. She has the perfect eyes to communicate the silent determination of our silent protagonist archetype we always get in these kind of films. Maybe it lacks the linear focus of Mad Max Fury Road, which in my books is still a masterpiece. The scope here is much larger than was in the previous film, and there was something sensational about all the practical effects used in that film. Clearly it shows that there's a heavier emphasis on CGI VFX this time around, but that never seemed to detract from my appreciation of this epic film. There's so many batshit crazy ideas in this film that I'm still shocked to this day actually happened. Oh my god. I think the maggot scene was just a little bit too much. The madness of this dystopian world knows no bounds. And even though this film does use a lot of CGI and it does feel a little uncanny at times, it actually works beautifully in its favor in some strange way. Everything about this film is so over the top. This might not be the critical darling its predecessor was. Fury Road nabbed a whopping 10 Oscar nominations last time, while Furiosa didn't get a single nomination. But don't for 1 second think that this isn't one of the most exciting and deranged film experiences of the year. Next, at number 12 is a film that I did not expect to fall quite so head over heels in love with as I did. Queer is Luca Guadagnino's film adaptation of William S. Burroughs' short novella. And if you don't know that name, William S. Burroughs, perhaps that insane David Cronenberg film Naked Lunch will jog your memory. This film is perhaps not quite so deranged, but it is a very experimental film nonetheless. Honestly, I was floored by the profound soul-searching journey of this lonely former American soldier that falls for this much younger man in Mexico City. It is a deeply melancholic experience, quite sexy as well, but also disturbing. Our protagonist is far from perfect. I've rarely seen a man drink quite so much on film. You can see the tortured soul in the man's eyes and body language. It's also quite a hallucinogenic experience. There's a scene later in the film that I thought was remarkable. Few films ever quite captured that feeling in such a poetic and symbolic manner. And of course, I must shower praise for a sensational performance from Daniel Craig, perhaps the best of his career, and I'm positively shocked that he didn't get an Oscar nomination for his acting here in this film. I thought that was going to be a no-brainer. In fact, this film didn't get a single nomination whatsoever. one of the biggest snubs of the year for me personally. And the soundtrack made by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, who are best known for their work for Nine Inch Nails in case you didn't know, they honestly made my favorite soundtrack of the year. It's something that I revisit on a regular basis even to this day. There's this quality about it that's so beautiful and melancholic, and it taps into something I dare say spiritual in me, while also having these elements of horror. A remarkable soundtrack that I love to the depths of my soul. And FYI, this is Luca Guadagnino's second film in 2024. Perhaps we'll talk about his other film at one point in this list. Maybe, we'll see. Now, I know everyone's been talking about Emilia Perez this year. Now, I won't say I hated the film like a lot of people did, but I'll be honest, I really wasn't crazy about it. Frankly, I'm still shocked that it got 13 Oscar nominations. What? All that to say, when I think of transgender filmmaking in 2024 cinema, it ain't Emilia Perez that I'm thinking about. No, for me at number 12, I have to choose I Saw the TV Glow. This is the story of these two loner high schoolers that cross paths and bond over this lo-fi TV show called The Pink Opaque that gives off these very strong Buffy the Vampire Slayer vibes. In any case, this Mirror's TV show is bizarre and captivating, and perhaps it is slowly bleeding into reality. There's a fascinating mystery at the heart of this film that will take you on quite the cinematic journey. And even though it has a tiny budget, it manages to take you on this unhinged and visually creative journey like you wouldn't believe. It is absolutely kaleidoscopic at times. The lighting and color palette are simply breathtaking and oversaturated. Honestly, in terms of the visual look and feel of any film that came out this year, it is one of the top tier candidates as far as I'm concerned. And on top of all that, it has an absolute banger of a soundtrack. It's got this super noisy, shoegazy, melancholic vibe about it. Yeah, up there with Queer that I mentioned a moment ago, it's up there with my favorite soundtracks of the year. Though there are quite a few more needle drops rather than original compositions in this film. But on top of these very tastefully chosen needle drops, there are some unexpected features in this film. We got Phoebe Bridgers who appears, we got King Woman who appears as well, and Fred Durst as well of all people, acting as well a little bit in this film. So in conclusion, I can't say I'm surprised, but this film got a big fat 0 at the Oscars for the nominations. See if I care. This is one of the most unique and mind-bending, mind-altering films I've ever seen, and I imagine that any of us will see for quite a long time to come. It's rare they were treated as such a adventurous and experimental film-going experience, and I still cannot believe that Emilia Perez got 13 Oscar nominations. Those last two in particular kind of broke my mind trying to fit them in the top 10. I really tried, but let it be known that they are totally worthy of that highest of echelons on this list. But there's a point where it just gets impossible to rank films, so just let go and just appreciate them wherever they are on this list. So as always, once again, one final time, just take these rankings with a grain of salt. They're all fantastic films that deserve your attention. But no matter, here we are at the top 10 of 2024. These are the films that I consider to be my personal favorites of the year. Most of these films feature humble budgets, proving yet again that bigger is not necessarily better. Just look at some of these preposterously expensive Hollywood behemoths that lack any sort of soul or character. No, that's never what's been most important to the human spirit. It's artistry, passion, poetry, and humanity that marks our souls and lives on inside of us throughout the years, if not our entire lifetimes. So let's finish off this list in style, shall we? I know I've been rambling for a minute now, but I do love taking the time to appreciate these works of art as much as possible, because these are remarkable artistic ventures that are most certainly worthy of our time. To kick off the top 10, I'm going to start with Nosferatu. Robert Eggers is back again, and this time with the remake of the classic silent black and white horror film from 1922 that was inspired by Bram Stoker's Dracula, a novel that came out in 1897. I don't think any director in our time, or any other time for that matter, could have been better suited to helm this project. Even if it might be a little tame in comparison to some of Robert Eggers' past projects, especially his original creations that come from his mind, here he is ever so slightly constrained to source material, but this is nonetheless an absolute fever dream of a cinematic experience. This film has incredible industry-defining art direction and cinematography. It is truly a visual marvel. There are some shots in this film that had my jaw hit the floor. It was a magical, arcane, and surreal experience. And the prosthetic work to create this vampire is nothing short of legendary at this point. Truly transformative stuff. I think we all knew that Bill Skarsgård would be Count Orlok going into this film, and even with that pre-handed knowledge, I saw, heard, and felt nothing of Bill Skarsgård in this monstrosity. And that actually might be one of my favorite aspects of this film, the way it depicts the vampire. This ain't Edward Cullen from Twilight or the Salvatore brothers from the Vampire Diaries. This ain't the cute, sexy hunk of a man that looks like a Greek god. Oh no, Count Orlok ain't cute at all. This is an ancient evil undead monster. And I do want to highlight the monster aspect of it. There's something really gross and even kinky about it, which just makes it that much more personal and disturbing. Talk about getting freaky in the bedroom. Ugh. On a side note, this has to be one of the strangest and kinkiest Christmas days ever at the cinema, to have Nosferatu paired with Baby Girl at the same time. Oh boy. I remember picking up my movie ticket for Baby Girl one night and seeing that I was alone in the cinema with one dude in the top right corner of the cinema. I was not gonna look your way at all. You do you, man. Anyway, Nosferatu did get 4 Oscar nominations. It was up for Best Cinematography. Huge W. Couldn't agree more. I don't even care that it didn't win. And it was also up for Best Costume Design, Best Production Design, and Best Makeup and Hairstyling. I don't even care that it didn't win anything. For me, I still see this as a gigantic landmark achievement for the world of horror cinema. This is an instant classic and everyone should go see this. Now, I did say we'd be focusing on smaller films with relatively humble budgets. This is true, but there is one major exception to the rule. Of course, at number 9, I have to include Dune Part 2. Denis Villeneuve, our hometown hero from Montreal, follows up with arguably an even better film than the previous time. This is big budget, epic Hollywood at its shining best. Yes, it has spectacle, the visual effects, art direction, and cinematography are a landmark achievement that on its own would catapult this film into the all-time greats, and the film features an all-star cast top to bottom that fill their roles wonderfully. But it's a story at the heart of this film that resonates deeply within our soul. The spiritual journey of this destined to be leader is daunting. Many other films will make such a journey feel heroic, even something to be celebrated. But here, there's almost this sense of horror with the realization of what Paul Atreides must become. The gravity of war and its far-reaching consequences are keenly felt here. And it feels like Denis Villeneuve was born to direct these films. He intimately understood how to adapt these marvelous books into film and to respect Frank Herbert's vision. This is a masterclass in film direction and adaptation from source material. And I'm delighted to know that he'll be back one last time to direct the adaptation of Dune Messiah, which is actually the second book, before hanging up that mantle of responsibility and moving on to different projects. It will be curious to see how he's going to grow further on as a filmmaker. But really, I just want to take a moment to just highlight how lucky we are to have such a gifted filmmaker bring this marvelous series to the big screen for us. Truly, this is the cinematic blockbuster event of 2024 as far as I'm concerned. If you're watching this film on a small screen with shitty speakers, my heart breaks for you. You are not getting the same experience. This is the kind of film that gives the IMAX theater screen a raison d'etre, and this sequel received 5 Oscar nominations, whereas Part 1 had 10 Oscar nominations, winning 6 of them. This time it was up for Best Picture, Best Cinematography, of course it was, and Best Production Design, and it did win 2 Oscars for Best Sound and Best Visual Effects. No directing nomination once again for Denis Villeneuve for his masterful work on directing these films, but even without that, we know that he is still one of the most prolific and respected filmmakers working today, with or without that official recognition. Inching our way up to the heavyweights on this list, at number 8, I personally have to include Love Lies Bleeding. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm a sucker for the film noir genre, and this film has those elements in spades, but it also manages to fit in quite a lot on top of that. This is also a romantic thriller paired with some female bodybuilding in the late 1980s, and it even has some vibes of the niche Italian giallo style of films. Not something I was expecting or something we get all that often nowadays. In a nutshell, this film tells the story of Lou, this reclusive gym manager who by chance crosses paths with Jackie, an ambitious bodybuilder who dreams of making it to Las Vegas for this competition she's been working tirelessly at. Their chemistry is instantaneous, and before you know it, they fall for each other hard. And I gotta say, this is one of the sexiest films I've seen all year long. God damn, it's hot. Unfortunately, things don't go according to plan for these girls. Lou comes from a family with deep criminal activity. Her father is played by a creepy Ed Harris, and because of those skeletons in her closet, their romance gets tainted by violence. I thought this was a riveting crime thriller. And in this film, we have truly stand-up performances from both leads. Kristen Stewart is showing once again that she has quite a lot of acting chops in some of her best acting to date. And Katie O'Brien is an absolute tool de force in this film. This is a sensational breakout performance. I'm very curious to see what comes next for her. And obviously, no spoilers, but that ending, man, was that a choice. A massive swing and a bold artistic statement, but as far as I'm concerned, it worked for me. No Oscar nominations over here, but fuck it. I think this film rules. And I really hate to see just how little this film made at the box office. At number 7, we gotta talk about Sing Sing. This is a remarkable drama about the RTA program at the Sing Sing Maximum Security Prison. And FYI, RTA stands for Rehabilitation Through the Arts Program. This is a film that explores deep human emotions through the art of theater. And these group of inmates choose to practice theater together during their time in prison as a way to process the anger and the pain they've experienced in their lives. However, this time, they opted to try something different. Rather than going for drama as they usually choose, they chose comedy, which arguably is an even more challenging medium to explore, and in a prison of all places. And in this film, we bear witness to these men exploring deep vulnerabilities with the objective of exploring these emotions to become human once again. It is a profound idea. The entire cast is pitch perfect. Coleman Domingo delivers a sensational performance. But what is most remarkable about the rest of the cast is that most of them are actual RTA alumni from Sing Sing. So the whole true story adaptation here takes on a whole new different meaning with that extra bit of knowledge. Just wow. This is one of the most powerful films of the year. And I'm happy to highlight the fact that Sing Sing was nominated for 3 Oscar nominations. For Best Actor in a Leading Role, Coleman Domingo really was one of the top tier contenders of acting of the whole year. No questions whatsoever about that. And it was up for Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Original Song. It might not have won anything, but I'm glad to see it get the recognition. At least to some degree, because it absolutely deserves it. Up at number 6, I am choosing A Real Pain. Any year-end list of 2024 cinema is incomplete without this film over here. This drama about these 2 cousins who reunite to travel together in Poland on this Jewish heritage tour to honor their grandmother's memory. If you think it's impossible to make a comedy with the Holocaust as a moral background underlying all the juicy drama in this film, think again. This is a comedy that will make you laugh to the bursting point, that is before sucker punches you in ways you won't see coming. It is a truly thought-provoking film. Jesse Eisenberg is showing up in top tier form here as this Swiss Army magician filmmaker. He wrote, directed, produced, and he's even acting in the leading role over here in this film. And though he might have a more introverted demeanor than his off-the-walls cousin, he creates a remarkable dramatic contrast that helps highlight many of the core tensions the film deals in. But of course, Kieran Culkin in this film is off the charts amazing. What can I say at this point? He basically got universal acclaim from everyone under the sun. Deservedly so. His portrayal of this tortured soul is a performance that will go down in a time capsule. There's a power and vulnerability rarely seen on screen, and even though he can be totally crazy and way too chaotic to those around him, subtlety is definitely not one of his strong suits. But even so, at the core of what he's saying, he has a point. And these are uncomfortable truths that are worth taking time to wrestle with and to digest. If that's not the mark of a great film and a great performance, I don't know what is. The film has 2 Oscar nominations. I could have gone for more, like a Best Picture, for example, but I won't lose too much sleep over that. It was nominated for Best Original Screenplay. Could not agree more. One of the best screenplays of the entire year. And of course, it won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for Kieran Culkin. No surprise there, it would have been unfair to bet on anyone else in this category wherever Kieran Culkin would be showing up. It was not even a competition this time around. The only plot twist for me is that this was considered as a supporting role. Like, I know he's the cousin of the protagonist, so to speak, but he pretty much pound for pound shares the same amount of screen time, if not more, and we could definitely make the argument that he takes up a lot more room in the story. He pretty much is the central character in a way. Ultimately, who cares, but it does raise the question of like, what exactly are the roles over here? I can't help but think of Anthony Hopkins' historic Oscar win for Best Actor in a Leading Role for Sounds of the Lambs, playing Hannibal Lecter. It was a phenomenal performance, don't get me wrong, but he won for actor in a leading role while having like, 15 minutes of screen time in the film? Whereas here, this character is up for supporting role and he pretty much was there in the entire film. What even are the rules over here? In any case, that aside, this film is 100% unmissable. And let me be clear, I am not just showering praise on this film because I am Polish, FYI. At the top 5, we're finally getting to the bottom of this list. Honestly, these next 5 films are miraculous achievements in cinema. Who cares about the ranking? Just the fact that they exist is enough for me. And they are truly proof that the heart of independent filmmaking is very much alive and well. And thank God, because these would be dark times indeed otherwise. At number 5, Anora. I'm quite late to the Sean Baker party. I just recently watched The Florida Project for the first time not too long ago, and I loved it. All that to say, it is humbling to see such a courageous indie filmmaker that's obsessed in pursuing these small hidden stories that most people just do not care about, and to bring them to light for all of us to see. And now finally today he is recognized as one of the giant filmmakers on the world stage. Regardless of how small budget his films may be, Honora had a budget of what, like $6 million? It's the heart and artistic integrity that counts here. This is the story of Honora, a Sherpa in New York who has a chance encounter with the son of a wealthy Russian oligarch. Their acquaintance develops into something rather quickly. So quickly, in fact, that before long they find themselves in Las Vegas and married. Dream come true? Perhaps. I think some people struggle with the first 30 minutes of this film. There is a lot of sex and partying, so if you are a prude, perhaps this ain't the film for you. And there's no judgment whatsoever in this film in regards to her profession. It's just the reality of her situation that the film just portrays to us objectively. But once the drama kicks in, the tone of the film gets thrown on its head and does not stop. It's absolute chaos. That living room fight scene is pure cinema dynamite, and the film is oftentimes hilarious. That is, until it's not. Honora transforms into a relentless tour de force filled with conflicting emotions crashing into each other at the very same time within a single scene. Feelings of victory and defeat commingling at the same time, and you're never quite sure how you're supposed to be feeling. The film also has quite a few twists and turns that you might not see coming. I don't want to say too much, you really should just go check out this miracle of film for yourselves. And once again, I'm obviously not going to spoil anything, but the ending of this film, mwah! Chef's kiss. One of the most powerful finales of any film you'll see this year. And still to this day, it's hard to clearly make out how I feel about that scene. There's so much that is loaded into those final frames, and that question mark is exactly what it gives it lasting power. And yes, Honora was the major winner at the Oscars last time around. It had 6 nominations and 5 wins. The only Oscar nomination that didn't take home the prize was for Best Actor in a Supporting Role for Yura Borisov. It was tough competition with Kieran Culkin, as I mentioned previously. There was just no hope he was not going to win that one. But I'm still glad he got the nomination because he kind of is the secret weapon in this film, isn't he? Otherwise, Mikey Madison won for Best Actress in a Leading Role. She really was outstanding in this film. And then Sean Baker, the director, went home with 4 Oscars for this film. Because in case you didn't know, the man is a bit of a Swiss Army knife that wears several hats on his projects. So he took the Oscars for Best Picture because he was the producer, Best Director because he was the director, Best Original Screenplay because he did write the screenplay, and for Best Editing because, of course, as well, he's the editor of his films as well. A modern renaissance man, what can I tell you? This film was also last year's Palme d'Or winner at the Cannes Film Festival, which marks the 4th consecutive win for Neon. God damn, do they know how to pick their films? And though, as you can see, this is not on my number 1 position, you will never ever see me complain about seeing Honora sweep at the Oscars. It 100% deserves it. It is a remarkable piece of independent filmmaking. Inching our way closer and closer to the top spot. At number 4, we have The Substance, the crowning achievement in horror filmmaking in 2024. Holy shit, was this film absolutely unhinged, in the best way possible, mind you. Word of warning, if you're in any way squeamish for blood, guts, and viscera, stay far, far, far away from this film. This is honestly one of the grossest films I've ever seen. But by God, is this not one of the most unbridled creative genius moves of the year. And not only that, but this also doubles as one of the most searing feminist filmmaking statements, not just of this year, but ever really. And what a unique and original way of communicating that idea. Elizabeth Sparkle is an aging star in Hollywood. Because of those impossible to match beauty standards, she gets fired by her producer, played by a brilliantly disgusting Dennis Quaid. His name is Harvey, by the way, wink wink. And now she's living through an existential crisis, when all of a sudden she's proposed this mysterious substance that will create a younger, sexy version from her body. Sounds too good to be true? You bet. There's some very specific rules that must be followed. Or else what exactly? That is for you to find out if you have the courage to watch this film. What ensues is a hyper-surreal body horror experience for the ages. It is deranged like you could not believe, and if you haven't seen the film, I hope the internet has not spoiled, because it is worth discovering for yourself. God, was this a treat to discover in the cinema. Literally the last entire hour of the film, I was watching with eyes wide open, with jaw agape, and with just my hand covering my mouth. Holy shit. And yes, there were quite a few walkouts at the cinema. Honestly, I low-key understand. Upon leaving the cinema, I couldn't make heads or tails of how I felt about this film that I just experienced. And an experience it was, which is something that you can't say all too often about films, which is why it's so inseparable from my mind and such a defining moment in cinematic achievement in this year. This is a walloping cinematic experience. And honestly, I didn't even put too much hope into seeing this film get recognition at the Oscars. The Academy is notorious for snubbing the horror genre at large, yet lo and behold, it was up for 5 Oscars, and in the major categories as well. It only won 1 Oscar for Best Makeup and Hairstyling, which it totally deserves, and it was a tough competition between this and Nosferatu. But then it was also nominated for Best Picture, Best Directing, a directing nomination for a female director. Finally, again, and in the horror genre as well. Wow, maybe there is hope in the world. It was also up for Best Original Screenplay, also written by Coralie Farja, our director over here. And Demi Moore was up for Best Actress in a Leading Role. No shade whatsoever on Mikey Madison for winning for Honora. I'm totally thrilled for her, but personally, I was rooting for Demi Moore. And finally, it did start its buzz at the Cannes Film Festival. It was nominated for a Palme d'Or, and it did win for Best Screenplay. You know, sometimes award ceremonies can get their shit together right. Top 3! My choice for number 3 is going to be the Brazilian film I'm Still Here. This is a film based on a heartbreaking true story that starts off in the 1970s in Rio de Janeiro, where a beautiful family's lives are forever changed when one day, strange men darken the doorsteps of their home. Who are they? It's not clear. They're probably military men that take the father away for questioning. What questions are asked? Where are they taking him? For how long? They are not forthcoming whatsoever with any answers. All we are presented is just this bone-chilling, shark-eyed stare back in our face. What follows is a lonely, uphill battle of a mother in search of answers behind the disappearance of her husband at the hands of a totalitarian dictatorship. This film brought me and the entire cinema to tears on multiple occasions. It was not an easy film to watch, but in my opinion, an absolute vital experience, especially with everything I see happening in the world today. This wasn't that long ago, and history has a habit of repeating itself. Now, if I may permit myself for a slight tangent and a bit of impertinence, my review for I'm Still Here was literally my biggest video ever on the Bottomless Pit, so it's a bit of a landmark personally for me in my relatively humble YouTubing career here. I remember waking up after like 3 hours of sleep after a frankly epic Valentine's Day, and I remember checking my YouTube account to just see how the video is doing with no real expectations whatsoever, and just being gobsmacked by how it just skyrocketed. And the comments too. Jeez, you guys. On one hand, it was the sweetest comments I've ever had ever in my life, or on the other hand, I was getting totally roasted for a mistake that I made in the video, which I'm glad you guys pointed out and I got the message. So let me take a moment here to set the record straight. The Brazilian government did not boycott this film. It was a right-wing opposition that tried to do so, and unsuccessfully, I might add. So yeah, I got the message, guys. Hundreds of them, actually. Thank you for your correction. It was an important little detail that I messed up over there. So as far as I'm concerned, this is the most politically resonant film for me in the year 2024. And I'm over the moon delighted to see that it got 3 Oscar nominations for Best Picture, Best Actress, and Best International Film, which it did win for. I cannot sing high enough praises for this film. My pick for number 2 actually held the number 1 spot for a minute. It was an impossible choice, but I guess the heart wants what it wants. Regardless, even if it misses the number 1 spot by a hair's length, The Brutalist is a landmark achievement in the art of filmmaking. This is a giant 3.5 hour long film that miraculously zips by before you know it. It goes down shockingly smooth for such a colossal size of a film, which is a testament to just how much of an engrossing drama it was. And it does help that it does have an intermission in the middle, so you can have a little pee break. So this is the story of a visionary Hungarian architect, Laszlo Toth, who arrives to the United States after surviving the Holocaust. He struggles to rebuild his life from the ground up, chasing the American dream. And in time, he manages to have a few projects here and there until they progress in scope and complexity. Eventually, he meets this wealthy businessman, played by a fiendishly brilliant Guy Pearce, who commissions him to build a monumental construction on top of a hill. The film is remarkable on so many levels. The architecture is breathtaking itself, yes, but I'm fascinated at how this impossible construction mirrors the soul of not only the tortured genius of the architect himself, but also that of its benefactor. It almost feels like a tomb for their spirit in some strange way. I think there's a lot of poetry buried deep within this film that will take some unpacking, and that is most certainly worthy of you to engage with it on a deeper level like that. But it has to be said that by some black magic, this giant film was made on a shockingly small budget of roughly $9 million. How is it possible where in the age of these Hollywood films that are just costing like 250, if not more, $million, managed to be completely bereft of any artistic intention, and to have this film come out to not only be such a monumental artistic achievement, but also to look amazing as well. This film features some of the most breathtaking cinematography you'll see in any film this year, and all the intricate work of the costume design, set decoration perfectly captures the time period the film is set in. It's a remarkable achievement in film production that deserves to be studied. And the soundtrack, God, it's beautiful. I'm getting a little tired here, so I won't go too much in detail. This ramble has been going on for long enough, but the entire cast in this film is incredible. But of course, most notably, Adrien Brody, who truly went above and beyond to give a once-in-a-lifetime kind of performance. So it is no surprise that this film got 10 Oscar nominations. It truly is one of the behemoth achievements of the year. It was nominated in all major categories: Best Picture, Directing, Original Screenplay, Best Editing, and for Best Supporting Actor for both male and female. Guy Pearce and Felicity Jones were phenomenal in this film, and it did win for 3 of the awards. For Best Actor in a Leading Role, Adrien did give a very long-winded and lame speech, admittedly, but otherwise it was a incredible performance. And the film also won for Best Original Score and Cinematography. Yeah, this film is going into history books. It is a masterpiece and an instant classic. Finally, my favorite film of 2024. This is super subjective and just my own personal take, and it might be a bit of a hot take for some of you, but I'm gonna stick with my guns. My favorite film of 2024 is Challengers! It's that other Luca Guadagnino film that I teased earlier on in this list. Honestly, I had no real expectations going into this film. I was confident I'd enjoy it. I mean, Luca is a very talented filmmaker, and I don't know, I guess it did seem like fun to potentially witness Zendaya have a threesome with 2 young, handsome studs. Not that that was the reason that I was interested in the film in the first place, I assure you. Just a cherry on top of the cake, I guess. But the film had very little to do with that, actually, and ended up being so much more than anything I could have ever prepared for. Each of the 3 leads delivered dynamite performances. Zendaya has never been better with her acting skills as this pro tennis player turned coach. She absolutely dominates the screen. Mike Feist shows an incredible amount of range as a tennis champion trying to overcome a recent losing streak. And Josh O'Connor, who I mentioned previously in La Chimera, is an absolute revelation in this film. And the film features a killer soundtrack once again from Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, teaming up once again with Luca Guadagnino on his second film. These guys really are on fire lately. Already with their career-defining music in 9 Inch Nails, all the film soundtracks they've been doing, already winning Oscars for, and now also doing video game soundtracks for the next Naughty Dog game. Holy shit. But beyond that, I do love the narrative structure of this film. It is interesting how the film jumps back and forth between different time periods and different character perspectives, and it does mirror the dynamic battle of the tennis court as well. Quite a neat little metaphor over there. Also, Challengers is sexy as hell. Not so much in an actual physical sexual sense of the word, but in a truly erotic and flirtatious way. And in a very mature way too, if I might add. God damn, the drama was fire. The tension was damn near unbearable at times. All the drama and conflict layers progressively until the film builds to this heart-pounding, explosive crescendo for a finale of the ages. Holy fucking shit did I love this film. And I genuinely cannot believe that this film did not get a single Oscar nomination. In fact, neither of Luca Guadagnino's films got anything from the Oscars. Big fat L for the Academy. See if I care. Did the sexiest tennis drama film of all time just take my #1 spot on the year-end list? Yes, it did. And I can live with that. And there you have it. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to me ramble for as long as I did. I really do love talking about film, and as you can see, this was an incredible year for films in 2024. Whenever someone tells me like, oh, there are no more good films nowadays, I'm always like, what are you talking about? Where have you been? So for those people, you can redirect them to this list. And I almost never say these things on this channel, but if you did enjoy this video, feel free to leave a comment and like the video. I do genuinely enjoy hearing from you guys, and it does help the channel grow ever so slightly, even if it's by a tiny little bit. As you can see, I don't have that many subscribers, but that's okay. That's not why I do this channel. I really just generally get a kick out of for the self-improvement part of it, learning to just speak and express myself and to just share my love for film. Even if it just does a 0.0001% of improvement in the world to just introduce someone to some film that they haven't heard about, for me, that is a win. But I think I've taken up enough of your time now. And I need to get packing because I'm going on a lovely road trip tomorrow that I'm very, very much looking forward to. Life has been very full and exciting lately. So with all that being said, wishing you and your loved ones nothing but the best. Take care and talk to you soon. Bye bye bye.